Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper. Uncover the hidden secrets of history, from ancient mysteries to lost civilizations. Join us on this thrilling journey. Subscribe and dive into the unknown. In the early 17th century, a strange new story began to spread across Europe. It spoke of a secret brotherhood of philosophers, doctors, and alchemists who had discovered the secrets of the universe. They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Rosicrucians. They claimed to possess knowledge that could cure all disease, turn lead into gold, and guide humanity to a new golden age of enlightenment. But who were they? Were the Rosicrucians a real, ancient society, secretly shaping the course of modern science from the shadows? Or were they just an elaborate intellectual prank, a legend that sparked a revolution of thought? Let's unravel the enigma of the Rosicrucians. Our story does not begin in the mists of ancient Egypt or on a battlefield in India. It begins with the scent of ink and paper. It begins in the early 17th century, a time of profound and violent change in Europe. The old world was dying, and a new one was struggling to be born. The absolute authority of the Catholic Church had been fractured by the Protestant Reformation, leading to decades of brutal religious warfare. At the same time, the old scientific dogmas of Aristotle and Ptolemy were being challenged by new, radical thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo, who were redrawing the very map of the heavens. It was an age of intense anxiety, but also of incredible hope, a feeling that humanity was on the cusp of a great, new awakening. And it was into this fertile, turbulent ground that a single mysterious seed was planted, a seed that would blossom into one of the most enduring and influential legends of all time. The story of the Rosicrucians erupts into public consciousness not with a secret meeting or a celestial event, but with the publication of a small, anonymous pamphlet. In the year 1614, a document titled Fama Fraternitatis Rosicrucis, or a report on the Brotherhood of the Rosicrucians, appeared in the city of Kassel, Germany. It circulated like wildfire, passed from hand to hand in universities, print shops, and the royal courts of Europe. The document was an electrifying read. It told, for the first time, the incredible life story of the Brotherhood's founder, a mysterious figure it called Our Father, the highly illuminated CRC. This was later understood to stand for Christian Rosenkreuz, or Christian Rosicrucians. The Fama recounted a story that sounded like a grand adventure novel. It described Rosenkreuz as a noble but poor German man born in 1378. Driven by a holy quest to find a universal truth that could heal the world's divisions, he embarked on a great journey as a young man. He traveled to the Middle East, a land that, in the European imagination, was a source of ancient and exotic wisdom. There, in mystical cities like Damascus in Syria and a fabled place called Damkar in Arabia, he was not shunned, but welcomed. He was taken in by wise Arab masters, who shared with him their deepest secrets. He learned the hidden arts of alchemy, the true principles of medicine, the secrets of mathematics, and the forgotten magic of the natural world. He gathered a vast storehouse of knowledge, a perfect synthesis of Eastern mysticism and Western logic. After years of study, he returned to Europe, his mind filled with a plan for a universal reformation of mankind. He was convinced that the knowledge he now possessed could end all war, cure all disease, and usher in a new golden age of enlightenment. But when he tried to share his discoveries with the learned scholars and arrogant academics of Europe, he was met with ridicule and scorn. Their minds were closed, trapped in dogma and petty intellectual rivalries. They were not worthy of his wisdom. Heartbroken but not defeated, Rosenkreuz returned to his native Germany. There, he gathered a small, initial group of 3 loyal disciples. Together, they founded the original secret brotherhood, the Fraternitatis Rosicrucis. They swore an oath to keep their knowledge secret, to heal the sick for free, and to operate in the shadows, silently working for the betterment of humanity. The Fama then revealed the most astonishing part of the story. It claimed that after living for over 100 years, Christian Rosenkreutz had died and been laid to rest in a secret, perfectly hidden vault. This tomb, it said, had remained undiscovered for 120 years, until the current generation of the Brotherhood had recently stumbled upon it. Inside, they found his body perfectly preserved, surrounded by magical artifacts and, most importantly, the complete library of his secret knowledge. The Fama concluded by announcing that the tomb had now been opened, the time of secrecy was ending, and the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross was now ready to share its wisdom with the world. The impact of this document cannot be overstated. It was a sensation. Europe's intellectual community was buzzing. Who were these mysterious brothers? Was this story true? Could there really be a secret society that held the keys to the universe? The Fama was a direct challenge to the established order. It was a promise of a new dawn, a secret history that completely upended the official narrative of science and religion. But before the dust could even settle from this first publication, the Invisible Brotherhood struck again. Just 1 year later, in 1615, a second, even more audacious document appeared, titled Confessio Fraternitatis, or The Confession of the Brotherhood. If the Fama was a mysterious story, the Confessio was a bold and aggressive manifesto. It was addressed directly to the learned and rulers of Europe. It dropped the allegorical storytelling and spoke with a confident, almost arrogant voice. It openly declared that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood truly existed and possessed a wisdom far greater than any king or pope. It savagely criticized the established authorities of the time, calling the Pope the Antichrist and dismissing the official philosophers and scientists as ignorant fools clinging to outdated ideas. The Confessio doubled down on all the claims of the Fama. It confirmed the existence of Christian Rosenkreutz and the secret knowledge he had brought back from the East. It promised that this knowledge would allow humanity to turn lead into gold, to discover eternal life, and to understand the deepest secrets of creation. It was a direct attack on the intellectual and religious foundations of 17th century Europe. And then it made its grand invitation. The Confessio formally invited the worthy and sincere scholars of Europe to make their interests known. It called for the best minds of the age to publicly announce their desire to join the Brotherhood's cause. If they were deemed worthy, the document promised, the Rosicrucians would find a way to make contact. They were building an army of the mind, and this was their public recruitment drive. The intellectual world was now in a full-blown frenzy. But the mysteries were not over. In 1616, a third and final text appeared, and it was by far the strangest of the three. This book was called The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz. Unlike the first two documents, this was not a report or a manifesto. It was a complex, dreamlike allegorical novel. It reads like a bizarre fairy tale for alchemists. The book is a first-person account by Rosenkreutz himself, describing his journey to a magical castle to attend the mystical wedding of a king and queen. His journey is filled with surreal symbolism, elaborate rituals, bizarre creatures, and a series of difficult tests and trials that he must overcome. The entire story is a dense allegory for the process of spiritual alchemy, the purification of the soul, and its ultimate union with the divine. It's a deeply personal and mystical text, a stark contrast to the public-facing Fama and Confessio. These three documents, appearing in 3 successive years, became the founding pillars of the entire Rosicrucian legend. The Fama told the history, the Confessio stated the mission, and the chemical wedding revealed the spiritual path. Together, they presented a complete picture of a secret society that was ancient, powerful, and now, finally, ready to change the world. The result of this 3-year publication blitz was what historians now call the Rosicrucian furor. An absolute mania swept across Europe. Hundreds of books, pamphlets, and letters were published, either attacking the Brotherhood as a dangerous heresy or passionately defending it. The most brilliant and influential minds of the age were captivated. Men like the philosopher René Descartes and the scientist Robert Fludd publicly expressed their intense desire to make contact with the Brotherhood. They wrote open letters, hoping for a reply. They traveled, searching for any sign of this secret order. The dream of joining this invisible college of illuminated masters became the great obsession of the European intellectual elite. But this is where the story takes its most mysterious turn of all. No one could find them. Despite the public invitation, not a single person ever came forward to say, "I have been contacted. I have met the Rosicrucians." The Brotherhood remained completely, utterly invisible. No one knew who they were, where their secret headquarters was, or how to join them. This profound silence was a masterstroke of psychological marketing. Their invisibility didn't make people doubt their existence. It made them seem even more powerful and exclusive. It proved that they were masters of secrecy, able to operate in plain sight without being detected. The call had been sent out. The wise of Europe were clamoring to join. But the secret college remained hidden, a tantalizing and unreachable ghost, forever changing the intellectual landscape of Europe from the shadows. The stage was set, the invitation was made, but the hosts of the party were nowhere to be found. Every great movement, every secret brotherhood, needs a found-era heroic, central figure whose life story embodies the society's highest ideals. For the Rosicrucians, this figure was a man known to us only as Brother CRC, a name later revealed to be Christian Rosenkreuz. His story, as told in the Fama Fraternitatis, is not a dry historical account. It is a grand, sweeping epic, a classic hero's journey that follows a young man on a quest for ultimate truth. It's a story of adventure, of mentorship, of rejection, and finally of the creation of a fellowship that would change the world. To understand the heart of Rosicrucianism, we must first follow the legendary footsteps of its founder. Our story begins in Germany in the year 1378. It was a time of conflict and division in Europe, the late Middle Ages, a world still steeped in feudal tradition and religious dogma. Into this world was born a boy of noble, but impoverished German heritage. From a young age, Christian Rosenkreuz was different. While other boys of his station might have dreamed of becoming knights or landowners, he was consumed by a much deeper and more profound ambition. He looked out at the world and saw sickness. He saw a society torn apart by religious schism, a world where the poor suffered while the rich grew fat, and where the so-called wise men of the age were trapped in endless, pointless debates. He felt a divine calling, a powerful urge to embark on a quest, not for gold or glory, but for a universal reformation of mankind. He wanted to find a hidden wisdom, a perfect philosophy that could heal the world's wounds and unite all of humanity under a single, enlightened truth. This was his call to adventure. As a young man of just 16, he set out on his great journey. His initial destination was the Holy Land, a traditional pilgrimage for devout Christians. He traveled with a monk, heading east to see the places where his own faith had been born. But destiny had other plans for him. On the island of Cyprus, his companion died, and Rosenkreuz found himself alone, a young man in a foreign land. Instead of being discouraged, he felt liberated. Freed from the constraints of a traditional pilgrimage, he decided to continue his journey not just to Jerusalem, but beyond into the heart of the infidel lands of the East, the very places his culture had taught him to fear. He was driven by an insatiable curiosity, a belief that wisdom could be found in the most unexpected of places. His quest for knowledge led him first to the ancient city of Damascus in Syria, a major center of learning and trade. There, he was astounded by the sophistication of the Arab world. He encountered a science and philosophy far more advanced than what he had known in Europe. But his true destination lay even further east. He had heard whispers of a mythical, hidden city of wise men somewhere in the deserts of Arabia, a place called Damkar. After a long and difficult journey, he found it. In the legend of Damkar, we see the true beginning of his transformation. He was not treated as a Christian outsider, but was welcomed as a fellow seeker of truth. The wise men of Damkar, who were expecting him as if his arrival had been prophesied, took him in as a student. For 3 years he immersed himself in their teachings. This was the period of his great mentorship. He learned the Arabic language and began to translate their most sacred texts. The wise men of Damkar taught him the secrets of the natural world, the hidden properties of plants and minerals, and the true science of medicine. They revealed to him the secrets of mathematics and astronomy, a knowledge that allowed them to understand the true harmony of the cosmos. It was here, the legend says, that he first learned the foundational principles of what would become Rosicrucian wisdom, a perfect synthesis of science, art, and religion, where the physical and spiritual worlds were seen not as separate, but as two sides of the same divine reality. He had found the treasure he was seeking. His mind now illuminated with this profound new knowledge, he left Damkar and traveled to Egypt, another ancient center of mystery and magic, and then to the Moorish kingdom in Spain, absorbing more wisdom along the way. Finally, his great journey came to an end. He returned to Europe, a changed man, carrying with him a library of priceless knowledge in his mind and in the precious texts he had translated. He was now a master, possessing a universal science that he believed could heal the sickness of his home continent. He was filled with a youthful and optimistic zeal, convinced that the learned men of Europe would be overjoyed to receive the gifts he brought. He approached the most famous universities and the most respected scholars, offering to share his discoveries freely. He offered them a new physics, a new medicine, a new mathematics, a complete reformation of all the arts and sciences. But what he encountered was a wall of arrogance and disbelief. This was the stage of his great rejection. The scholars of Europe, secure in their own dogma and their own intellectual superiority, scoffed at him. They saw him as a young upstart, contaminated by the heathen philosophies of the Arabs. They were unwilling to admit that their own systems could be flawed or that true wisdom could come from outside their own closed circle. They dismissed his claims as fantasy and his knowledge as heresy. Deeply disappointed by their short-sightedness and intellectual pride, Rosenkreutz realized that the world was not yet ready for his truth. The pearl of great price he offered was being cast before swine. The grand, universal reformation he had dreamed of would have to wait. Defeated but not broken, he retreated from the public eye. He returned to his native Germany, not as a celebrated sage, but as a quiet, solitary figure. He understood now that the knowledge he possessed was too powerful and too dangerous to be released into a world so filled with ignorance and greed. It had to be protected. It had to be nurtured in secret, waiting for a time when humanity would be mature enough to receive it. And so, he embarked on the final stage of his heroic journey, the creation of the fellowship. He sought out a small number of his old companions from his monastery days, men who were loyal, open-minded, and sincere in their desire for truth. He began with just 3, and over time, the group grew to a total of 8 members, including himself. In a secret building they called the Sanctus Spiritus, or the House of the Holy Spirit, he founded the original Fraternitatis Rosicrucis, the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. He shared with these chosen few all the knowledge he had gathered on his travels. Together, they refined this wisdom, organized it, and swore a series of solemn oaths. They vowed to heal the sick without payment, to keep the existence of their society a secret for 100 years, and to meet once a year to share their findings. Most importantly, they vowed to find a worthy successor to replace them before they died, ensuring that the Brotherhood and its sacred knowledge would be immortal. We have now heard the official story, the grand and heroic legend presented in the Rosicrucian manifestos. It's a tale of a secret brotherhood, an ancient founder, and a hidden wisdom poised to change the world. For hundreds of years, this story captivated Europe, sending its greatest minds on a frantic search for the invisible college. But the search always came up empty. The brothers remained invisible, their headquarters undiscoverable, their membership a total mystery. This profound silence leads any critical investigator to a crucial question. What if there was nothing to find? What if the Brotherhood, as described in the pamphlets, never actually existed? This forces us to shift our focus. We must stop searching for the society itself and start searching for the authors of the manifestos. Who really wrote these explosive documents? Were they the chosen scribes of a real secret society? Or were they something else entirely? Our investigation now becomes a cold case, and we have a list of prime suspects. Our first, and by far the most likely, suspect is a brilliant and complex young theologian from Germany named Johann Valentin Andrea. To understand Andrea, we must understand the world he lived in. He was a devout Lutheran pastor living in a time of intense religious fervor and intellectual excitement. He was part of a circle of highly intelligent, idealistic, and somewhat mischievous young thinkers at the University of Tübingen. They were passionate about reforming society, they were fascinated by mysticism and alchemy, but they were also critical thinkers who were deeply concerned about the rise of pseudoscience and charlatans who preyed on the gullible. For many years, Andrea's connection to the manifestos was just a rumor. But late in his life, he made a startling admission. In his autobiography, he claimed that he had written The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, the third and most surreal of the three manifestos. He went on to describe the book as a ludibrium, a Latin word that can mean a joke, a prank, or a stage play. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. The man most likely connected to the texts himself described at least one of them as a work of fiction designed for a specific purpose. This leads us to the most widely accepted theory among mainstream historians. The theory is that the Rosicrucian manifestos were, in fact, an elaborate intellectual hoax, a brilliant prank with a very serious purpose, orchestrated by Andrea and his circle of friends. They looked at the world around them and saw a society obsessed with magic, secrets, and the promise of easy solutions. They decided to create a fictional secret society, the perfect ideal brotherhood, as a kind of mirror to hold up to society. They crafted the legend of Christian Rosenkreuz and the promise of hidden knowledge to see how people would react. The goal was twofold. First, it was a satire, a way to poke fun at the credulity of the age, to expose the foolishness of those who would blindly believe in any fantastic tale. But secondly, and more importantly, it was a call to action. By creating a fictional society dedicated to true science, genuine Christian piety, and the collaborative pursuit of knowledge, they were trying to inspire real people to embrace these ideals. They were essentially saying, stop looking for a magical secret society to solve all your problems. You should become the Rosicrucians. You should form your own brotherhoods dedicated to reforming science and society. In this view, the manifestos were a work of serious fun. A prank designed not just to mock, but to inspire. Andrea and his friends launched their message in a bottle into the sea of European thought, and were likely stunned when it created not just a ripple, but a tidal wave of belief. The hoax had become more real and more powerful than they had ever intended. This theory is neat, logical, and well supported by the evidence. But for many, it feels too simple. It doesn't quite capture the profound spiritual depth and sincerity found within the texts. This leads us to our second suspect, or rather, our second major theory. This theory proposes that Johann Valentin Andrea was not the creator of the legend, but merely a scribe, a publicist for a secret society that already existed long before the manifestos were published. In this view, the Rosicrucian Brotherhood was not a fiction, but a real, hidden order that had been operating in the shadows for generations, perhaps even centuries. According to this hypothesis, the society chose the early 17th century as the perfect moment to make its existence known. It was a time of great crisis, but also of great potential. They saw that humanity was at a crossroads. The members of this Real Brotherhood decided to test the waters. They anonymously published the Fama and the Confessio as a kind of grand social experiment. The manifestos were a coded message, a call sent out into the world to see who would respond and how they would respond. They wanted to identify the truly sincere seekers, the wise and worthy individuals who were not motivated by greed for gold or personal power, but by a genuine desire to reform the world. The fact that no one could find them was part of the test. A person who was truly worthy would understand that the path to enlightenment was an internal one, not a matter of joining a physical club. The society remained invisible because they were evaluating the applicants from afar, judging them by their public writings and their actions. This theory suggests that they did, in fact, make contact with a select few individuals who passed their secret test, quietly initiating them into their ranks while the rest of the world continued its frantic and fruitless public search. This theory preserves the magic of the legend. It allows for the possibility that Andrea was involved, but casts him in the role of a chosen messenger rather than a clever prankster. The invisible college was real, this theory claims. Its gates were just impossibly difficult to find. There is, however, a third possibility, a middle ground between the hoax theory and the real secret society theory. This hypothesis suggests that we are asking the wrong question. We are looking for a formal, structured organization with a headquarters, a membership list, and secret handshakes. But what if the Rosicrucians were never a society in that sense at all? This theory proposes that Rosicrucianism was actually a powerful but informal intellectual movement. It was a loose, decentralized network of like-minded individuals who were connected not by oaths and rituals, but by a shared set of revolutionary ideas. Think of the intellectual landscape of the early 17th century. It was a time before scientific journals, universities as we know them, or the internet. Thinkers who held radical ideas were often isolated, and could even be persecuted for heresy. This theory suggests that a network of these forward-thinkers, alchemists, doctors, mystics, and social reformers like Sir Francis Bacon in England were already communicating with each other through letters and coded manuscripts. They shared a common dream, a universal reformation based on empirical science, mathematical reason, and a more personal, spiritual form of Christianity. In this view, the manifestos were not the work of a single person or a formal committee. They were a collaborative effort, a kind of crowdsourced document that gave a name and a powerful symbol, the rose and the cross, to the philosophical movement that was already underway. The publication of the manifestos was a way to energize this network, to announce their shared ideals to the world, and to recruit others to their way of thinking. The invisible college was real, but it was invisible because it had no physical location. It existed in the letters, the ideas, and the shared aspirations of a generation of Europe's most brilliant and daring minds. The manifestos were not an invitation to join a club. They were an invitation to join a revolution of thought. Finally, we must acknowledge the fourth and most esoteric line of inquiry. This path takes us beyond historical suspects and into the realm of fringe theory. For some believers, the knowledge contained within the manifestos is so profound that it could not have originated from any human source in the 17th century, not even a secret network of geniuses. This leads to theories of an even more secret, non-human origin. One popular fringe theory suggests that the Rosicrucians were the direct inheritors of the knowledge and treasure of the legendary Knights Templar. When the Templar order was brutally suppressed in the early 14th century, this theory claims a small group of knights escaped with their secret Wistoma blend of Eastern mysticism and Christian Gnosticism and fled to remote parts of Europe, like Scotland and Germany. There, they went underground and, over generations, reformed as the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. Christian Rosenkreuz, in this view, is a symbolic figure representing the rebirth of the Templar spirit. An even more radical theory bypasses the Templars altogether and suggests a more supernatural source. Drawing on the theosophical ideas that influenced Talbot Mundy's work on the 9 Unknown Men, this theory proposes that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood was, and still is, in direct contact with a hierarchy of higher, non-human intelligences. These beings, sometimes called ascended masters, secret chiefs, or even benevolent extraterrestrials, are the true guardians of humanity's evolution. They exist on a different plane of reality but can communicate with worthy human adepts. According to this belief, the manifestos were inspired, or perhaps directly dictated, by these spiritual masters as a way to nudge humanity onto a more enlightened path at a critical juncture in its history. The Rosicrucian adepts were not the source of the wisdom. They were merely the channels, the human transmitters for a divine or cosmic intelligence. So we are left with a fascinating lineup of suspects. Was it a brilliant theologian playing a serious joke? Was it the public announcement of a real, ancient brotherhood? Was it the symbolic manifesto of a loose intellectual movement? Or was it the earthly expression of a hidden power, be it Templar or something far, far stranger? The truth, like the college itself, remains tantalizingly invisible. In the end, we may never know with absolute certainty who wrote the Rosicrucian manifestos. Was it a real secret society? Was it an elaborate intellectual prank? The historical trail grows cold, and the definitive proof remains elusive. But as we step back from the investigation, a remarkable and profound truth comes into focus. In a strange and powerful way, the question of whether the original Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross was real or not simply doesn't matter. The legacy of the Rosicrucians is not found in a hidden tomb or a secret library. Their true legacy is found in the undeniable and massive impact they had on the world. The story they told, whether fact or fiction, was so powerful that it became a catalyst, a spark that ignited a series of intellectual and cultural revolutions that are still shaping our world today. To understand the Rosicrucians, we must look at the ripples they left behind. The first and arguably most important ripple effect was on the birth of modern science. Before the 17th century, the pursuit of knowledge was often a solitary, secretive, and chaotic affair. The natural philosopher, the forerunner of the modern scientist, often worked in isolation. Alchemy was shrouded in mystical allegory, and open collaboration was rare. The Rosicrucian manifestos presented a radical new vision. They described a brotherhood dedicated to a specific kind of learning, collaborative, experimental, and for the benefit of all humanity. They dreamed of an invisible college, where the best minds would work together, sharing their discoveries openly to advance the collective understanding of nature. This was a revolutionary idea. This fictional ideal directly inspired the creation of very real scientific organizations. In England, a group of natural philosophers, including men like Robert Boyle, the father of modern chemistry, began to meet informally. They were deeply influenced by the Rosicrucian call for a new kind of science. They called their group the Invisible College. A few years later, in 1660, this informal group was formally chartered by the king and became one of the most important scientific institutions in history, the Royal Society of London. Its official motto, Nullius in Verba, translates to take nobody's word for it. It is a perfect expression of the Rosicrucian ideal of testing knowledge through experiment rather than blindly accepting old dogma. Many of the Royal Society's early members were fascinated by Rosicrucianism, seeing their own work as the real-world fulfillment of the promise made in the manifestos. In this sense, the fictional Brotherhood of Christian Rosencreutz acted as a philosophical midwife to the scientific revolution, helping to birth a new era of empirical and collaborative inquiry that forms the very foundation of our modern scientific world. The second major ripple effect was on the world of secret societies themselves. Before 1614, esoteric groups certainly existed, but the Rosicrucian manifestos created a powerful and romantic new blueprint. They provided the perfect template for a modern mystical order, a legendary founder, a secret history stretching back to ancient wisdom, a system of grades and initiations, and a philosophy that blended science with spirituality. The idea of the Rosicrucians was so compelling that if they didn't exist, other groups would have to invent them or become them. And that's exactly what happened. The most famous example is Freemasonry. In the 18th century, as Freemasonry evolved from a guild of stonemasons into a philosophical and esoteric society, it began to absorb and incorporate a vast amount of Rosicrucian symbolism and lore. The Rose-Croix, or Rosy Cross, became one of the highest and most important degrees within certain Masonic rites, such as the Scottish Rite. The themes of building a symbolic temple, of seeking light and hidden knowledge, and of a brotherhood dedicated to moral and social improvement, all echo the original Rosicrucian manifestos. Beyond Freemasonry, the Rosicrucian furor directly spawned countless other organizations. Over the centuries, dozens of different groups have called themselves Rosicrucian, each one claiming to be the one true heir to the original, invisible brotherhood. Orders like the Rosicrucian Order, Amorc, and the Societas Rosicruciana still exist today, with thousands of members worldwide who continue to study the philosophy laid out in those original 17th century pamphlets. The legend created a powerful brand, an identity that has been adopted, adapted, and kept alive for over 400 years. The third ripple is felt not in the halls of science or the secret temples of mystics, but in our wider culture. The Rosicrucians, and the potent symbols associated with them, have left a lasting and indelible mark on Western art, literature, and philosophy. The central image of a rose blooming on a cross is a beautiful and complex symbol, representing the flowering of the human spirit through sacrifice, the union of the physical and the divine, and the secret of resurrection and rebirth. This symbol, and the romantic idea of the wise, benevolent Rosicrucian adept, has been a source of endless fascination for artists and writers. We see echoes of their philosophy in the alchemical studies of Sir Isaac Newton, a man who spent more time on esoteric pursuits than he did on the physics for which he is famous. We see their influence in the mystical poetry of William Blake and the complex symbolism in the works of Goethe. In more modern times, the idea of the Rosicrucian sage or secret society has appeared in countless novels, from the historical fiction of Umberto Eco to the popular thrillers of Dan Brown. They have become a permanent fixture in our cultural landscape, a go-to symbol for hidden knowledge and enlightened mystery. The Rosicrucians provided a new kind of hero for the modern world. Not a warrior or a king, but the secret philosopher, the adept who possesses the wisdom to change the world, but the restraint not to. This brings us to our final and most profound conclusion about their legacy. The Rosicrucian hoax, if that's what it was, ultimately had a greater and more positive impact on the world than most real organizations could ever hope to achieve. The story succeeded because it was exactly what the world needed at that precise moment in history. It was a catalyst, a single powerful idea that landed like a spark in the dry tinder of a Europe that was desperate for change. The manifestos created a shared dream, a collective aspiration for a better, more enlightened world. They gave people a language and a set of symbols to express their desire for a society based on reason, tolerance, and the free pursuit of knowledge. The ultimate irony of the Rosicrucian mystery is that by searching for the invisible college, the people of Europe actually built it. By trying to live up to the ideals of a fictional brotherhood, they created real scientific societies. By trying to emulate the wisdom of a legendary founder, they pushed the boundaries of real philosophy. The Rosicrucian legend proves that sometimes a powerful idea is far more important than the literal truth behind it. It demonstrates that a story can reshape reality. The search for the Rosicrucians was never about finding a secret room full of men in robes. It was about finding the potential within ourselves. And in that sense, the quest they inspired 400 years ago is a quest that continues to this very day. The legacy of the Rosicrucians is a powerful reminder that the greatest changes in human history often begin not with a battle or a decree, but with a single, compelling question: what if there's a better way? So, who were the Rosicrucians? Were they a secret brotherhood of ancient masters, or an elaborate joke created by a clever young theologian? The evidence suggests the latter, but in a strange way, the answer doesn't diminish their importance. The Rosicrucian manifestos created a phantom society so compelling, so full of hope and promise, that it inspired real scientists, real philosophers, and real mystics to pursue its ideals. It was a legend that gave birth to reality. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful force for change isn't a secret society, but a single revolutionary idea released into the world at exactly the right time. Thanks for exploring history's mysteries with Ancient Relics Keeper. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What secret should we unravel next? Stay curious and see you soon.